Welcome to the Biz Bash podcast, where we make biz strategy a piece of cake. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Cami, but you might know us better as Eliza Ann Calligraphy and Cami Monet. We want to help you, our fellow stationers, artists, and calligraphers, confidently build a profitable and personality-driven creative biz.
We're here to share our honest-to-goodness advice and actionable strategies for ambitious artists.
So put on your party hat, quit being a procrastinator gator, and let's get this party started.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Biz Birthday Bash podcast. I am beyond excited about the guest that we have for you guys today. I have been wanting her on the podcast for a long time. So hello, Jenna. We're so excited you're here.
Hello. I'm very excited to be on.
This should be very fun, and I'm very excited that you were able to, well, Jenna and I were just talking about before this. It's hard to record podcasts when you have a little one around. So
Yes.
I'm excited I get a little bit of her time while she is free to do that. But let me read her bio. Oh, this is Jenna Rainey, everyone. Y'all, if you haven't heard of Jenna Rainey, go find her on Instagram to see all her amazing work. But a little bit of a bio. Jenna Rainey is a watercolor artist, textile designer, 3 times published author, self-proclaimed color theory expert, and creative entrepreneur. Her career began in 2012 with designing custom stationery and calligraphy jobs for weddings, but now she can be found teaching watercolor on her YouTube channel, recording lessons in her online courses for business owners, and working on her next product collaboration. Jenna's work has been featured in Forbes, Martha Stewart Weddings, BuzzFeed, Brit & Co., Better Homes and Gardens, and more. And so that's crazy. 10 years. So this will be 10 years for you.
A decade, a solid decade. It feels like 2 more decades, but then it also feels like 10 months sometimes.
Right. It feels in some ways that you probably started yesterday. And I took the very original Modern Calligraphy Summit, which I think you would have been part of. Were you doing calligraphy or were you doing watercolor in that one? I can't remember.
I did watercolor. Yeah, I did watercolor for both of the summits. Yeah.
Okay. And probably did some like scanning lessons or something to teach everyone how to get it into design programs. So yeah, that was like, it feels weird to say that feels like it was like way back in the day, but it does kind of feel like that. So we're kind of going to start at the beginning. Some of our audience is probably familiar with your story, but I just wanted to go way back. And the first question I have for you is, when did you first have an interest in art?
So that is a tricky question for me because I kind of always grew up around painting and art supplies just via my family. My mom and both of my grandmothers on both of my mom and dad's side are both painters, mostly acrylic painting. I never grew up playing with watercolor, which was something that I discovered after college and in my 20s. But art supplies and like painting on the weekends was kind of like a regular-ish thing for me. Growing up around a very creative mother, my mom, hello, Jill, she always listens to all of my things that I'm on, just like any supportive mom. Hi, Jill. She just kind of has her hand in all things fun and creative. So she, brought out the art supplies like our closets at home are full of crazy old paintbrushes, canvas, acrylic paint, oil paint. And so it was kind of just like a thing that we did to keep us busy, I guess. But I think my actual interest in art didn't really start until I was in college. And I went to school in Chicago. That's where I met my husband, John. He's from Wisconsin. And the winters are frigid. I'm not sure where you live, but the Midwest.
Georgia.
Then you're far from the Midwest.
But I grew up in Colorado, so.
Okay, yeah. John's parents now live in Colorado, and we love it there. It's a little bit more mild than the Midwest. It's like the frozen tundra up there.
Yes.
Very, very glad we moved back to California, but love Chicago. So we were living in Chicago. I was going to college, and I just felt like kind of like lost in my soul a bit. Like I loved that I was getting a degree in psychology. I thought I wanted to be a music therapist, and kept going to school, but hated it. Really, really hated school. I'm just not. I'm not the right person or personality type for the traditional schooling environment. But anyways, after college, I got a job working for my uncle in a financial planning office. I don't know why he loves me so much, but he was being very generous, knew that we didn't want to live in Chicago anymore. My mom really wanted us both, me and John, obviously, because we were married at this point, to move back to California. I wanted to be in the warmer weather. And so he offered me a job at his financial planning office, which was very sweet, very generous. However, I am also not a corporate, like office scenery type of person. And I worked there for a whopping 4 months before starting my business. So I think it was like kind of a push. It was never like a discovery of like, oh, wow, I really like art, I'm going to pursue this. It was just like art felt very therapeutic to me. I would come home from my office job that I, was able to move us out to California, where I'm from. And I would basically stay up painting with the random box of art supplies that I got from our move from Chicago that was mixed in, which is a whole nother story. We hired this moving truck company, and they had a box of art supplies in there that I had never seen before. So this was just like was it mine? Maybe it was, but I don't think so. Anyways, so there was like calligraphy stuff in there. There was acrylic paint and paintbrushes in there. So I busted out the calligraphy stuff right away. And this was when like Instagram, this was 2012. So like Instagram was around, but it wasn't used the way it's used.
It was a
now.
baby. Yeah.
It was a
baby.
Yeah. It was a baby, and it was a very different platform. Like people were sharing like photos of their shoes and like their, it was just like really random. Nobody thought of it as a marketing platform or like a way to start a business or anything like that. But then somewhere between like me finding calligraphy in 2012 and like getting into that it like, I found this account. She's not even a business anymore, but Hazel Wonderland, Meredith Bullock. Okay. She basically became like my mentor in the wedding industry before I started my business. And so anyway, long story short, even though that was already long, I kind of came across it throughout my life, but the like, I want to hold on to this and pursue it was kind of accidental and a way out of a corporate office scenario, and also just a way to find what I'm truly passionate about.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And I feel like for a lot of people, it's not necessarily an aha moment. And so I like your answer because I think that's representative of what a lot of people feel. So tell us then why you were specifically drawn to watercolor. You touched on that a little bit, but it's like the rest of your family was doing acrylic painting, and then watercolor was kind of where you settled in and have continued to use all these years. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I had grown up thinking that watercolor was like for old people. I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but it just had this like it wasn't like, I didn't have that modern feeling. So I was doing calligraphy like predominantly for the first 2 years of my business. And like I would illustrate. So I'd always like doodled on all of my notebooks growing up. So like also being an illustrator was a part of like people hiring me for wedding jobs. But the watercolor thing started because, again, back to Hazel Wonderland chick, who I don't even think that Instagram exists anymore. I'm not sure what she's up to anymore. Meredith, she had kids and then kind of stopped doing her art business. But she was doing watercolor and posting it on her Instagram in 2012. We became friends. She basically was trying to merge out of the wedding industry, and she was having a baby. And so she essentially, all of her wedding clients that she was getting, she was sending to me. And so all of her wedding clients were asking, or people wanting to hire her, were like, we want watercolor. We want floral watercolor. We want, this type of look or aesthetic. And I was like, okay, I've always been a person that like says yes, and then I figure it out later. And so I knew I could paint-ish. Like I knew like somewhat I could make it look decent enough. Mm-hmm. And especially for, the pricing that I had in the beginning days, like I wasn't a high budget at the time, just starting out. So I just kind of like figured it out as I went, but I only had acrylic paint. So I was essentially just like adding a ton of water to acrylic paint in a palette. And I had whatever brushes I had around that, I use watercolor brushes now from Princeton, but I didn't have those brushes back then. So it was very like hodgepodgey, like accidental discovery of watercolor via like it was starting to pick up as like more modern, more of younger, not that I'm trying to group it into a stereotype of age, but it had this like older feel to it. So it started to pick up a little bit in 2012. I think I contributed to Hazel Wonderland and the people in the earlier days of the wedding industry, because like that is also, I think, where Instagram really started taking off as like a platform to share and build your business, was through the wedding industry. I mean, could have been another industry, but to me, that has a lot to do with it. Yeah. So I started like, it's just in 2012 when I started picking up jobs from Meredith, from Hazel Wonderland. I feel like that's when it really, and I'm not going to attribute it all to Hazel Wonderland and the wedding industry, but I just feel like that really helped shift this like mindset that people had of watercolor. And I don't know, maybe it was only for me. I just felt that way. I felt like other people felt that way. And then in 2012 to like 14, I feel like it really started to just boom, and everybody was picking up watercolor and doing watercolor. And I think a lot of that had to do with the wedding industry. Like, I don't know, like, and Instagram too, Instagram becoming like a platform where you share more, like starting a business and like share, market yourself and all that kind of stuff. Like, I feel like that shift kind of almost happened because of the wedding industry and like photographers tagging stylists and tagging stationery designers and stuff. I don't know. That's just how it felt for me, but that's just how the watercolor came on the scene for me, and also wedding stuff too.
I mean, yeah, I think that there is so much truth to that specifically, as like the spread of influence, kind of started to happen within Instagram, and people were going there to seek inspiration, going there to make connections, and just trying to get a footing in the wedding industry in one way or another. So yeah, I think that had to do with a lot of it. So you had said earlier that you worked 4 months at this financial firm before deciding that you're going to go full-time with your creative business. So what did that look like when you were telling John, your husband, and then the rest of your family, like, hey, I want to do this? What were their reactions? And then what were you guys making sure you had set up and in place before that stuff happened?
Great question. So I was 23 at the time, and I did not have a good grasp on the world of business or the world in general. I thought I did, but I did not. I think I was actually at my uncle's job for like 6 months. Not that it makes a huge difference, but I do remember a time where I came out of the bedroom and I was dreading going to the office so much. Every single day was like, this feels like the worst. Like I was so grateful for the job, but at the same time, I had a long commute. I did not feel in my place at all. Like I just did not belong there. And so I remember like talking to John about how I wanted to like do some sort of part-time so I could start, because I was starting at this point to get people like 2 months after I worked for my uncle. I started getting like friends asking me, because all my friends started to get married right around like 23, 24. So they're like, hey, I see that you have nice handwriting. Can you do like our vows in some script that we can hang in our house, or like address our envelopes and stuff? So that started happening, and it was like starting to build to a point where I was literally taking calligraphy addressing jobs in my car and doing it on my lunch break at the office job, because I had no other time outside of the office job to work on them. And so I was like, I need like 2 days where I can work from home on this wedding stuff. And so anyway, I did that for all of about 2 weeks. And then I was like, I need to go full time. I had no money saved up. We had no money saved up. John worked at CarMax at the time. So he was selling used cars, not making tons. He's a very nice man and not pushy whatsoever, which are all amazing qualities to have in a husband, but not amazing qualities if you work on commission at a used car sales place. So he like obviously did a good job, but like all I'm trying to say is he wasn't slaying cars every 10 seconds and making tons of money. So we did not make great money, but I just knew in my gut that I had to get out and start this business. It just felt like a deep, like instinctual feeling that I needed to get out and start my business at that time. And it had to be that time. So I did. And I quit. And nobody said anything unsupportive. My husband, John, has always been extremely supportive, and he works with me now. So like, obviously he's extremely supportive. And my mom was really excited. I think my dad, he was very excited, obviously, but I mean, he's so practical. He like takes 9 years to make a decision. Not actually, but like, he's just like the most practical person in my family probably. But he was excited and like, okay, at least you're young, so you have some time. Like your risk tolerance is a little bit lower than mine because he's obviously older. Anyway, so they're all supportive. We had no finances saved up. You know, things like I needed to buy a computer. I didn't have Adobe programs. Those sort of things were like, ooh, we'll pay for it job by job type of thing. And it was really, really tight. And looking back, I wouldn't change any of that. Like I do think that the way I started made me the like really scrappy type of business owner. Like there's, you know, really calculated, planned out systems, all of that type of business owners. And then there's people that are like extremely scrappy, and I would call myself that person. And then I just over time developed those other assets as a business owner, you know, like the systems and organization and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was rough. I remember looking in our bank account often and being like, I don't think we're going to be able to pay our rent this week or this month or whatever, because it was so tight. But we made it, and we're here today, and we both work for the company full time.
Yes, I know. Such a big transformation from like what it was 10 years ago. And having watched you guys as you have moved from place to place, and now you have moved to another place. And we were kind of joking about that before we started recording. That you said you guys have moved 13 times.
13 times since we got married in 2010. So it's 12 years. 13 times in 12 years. That's a bit extreme. Right. But this most recent move is we're staying here for a long time.
Okay. Yeah. So things have changed a lot. So let's also talk about like something else that has changed, which was what the work you were doing at the beginning versus what you're doing now. So it would be kind of fun if you could walk us through the timeline, you know, if you think, okay, like the early years I did this, the middle years I did this, and now I'm doing this. I think that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I know. And I was just talking to you. Do you know Emily Jeffords? I'm sure you do. She's an oil painter. I was just in like her mastermind, like a guest expert thing. And we were talking about like, she was listing off all the different things that I do. I'm like, man, why do I do so many things? But I love all of the things. I just have like ADD. Anyway, so in the beginning of my career, it was just addressing envelopes, doing any sort of like calligraphy lettering. And I actually didn't do pointed pen calligraphy until like a few months of already doing fake calligraphy jobs, like with a pen and shading the downstrokes or whatever. And then about a year into it, 8 months into it, I was doing actual pointed pen calligraphy. Also around that time, a shop reached out to me out here in California in Fullerton, and they had just expanded their space, and they had like a workshop-ish area space. And so they had just started doing like floral arranging workshops or whatever. And this is, again, like I was right on the cusp of when workshops were starting to become a trend. And the shop owner reached out to me because I used to go in there and shop all the time. And she followed me on Instagram, and she was like, and this was when I was like baby, no followers on Instagram, and like was getting jobs here and there from Hazel Wonderland. But she was like, oh, I see that you do pointed pen calligraphy. Would you ever want to teach a workshop? And again, me being the type of person who says yes before I know how to do things, I said yes. And my first workshop was sold out there because that venue or that shop had a good email list and a strong customer base. So all of the people in the workshop were basically from this shop. And that helped to grow my Instagram because they were tagging me and posting on Instagram and all of that. But so I started with doing calligraphy for weddings. And then I was like, wow, this like workshop thing is pretty good money, especially compared to what I was charging for addressing envelopes when I first started, I think was like $1 per envelope or something ridiculous. Right. And so I was like, this is very laborious for like $100.
Yes.
Like, why am I doing this? And so I obviously increased my prices, but then I also started teaching every single weekend. I was teaching every single weekend for years, like years. And I was a good teacher, not to toot my own horn, but I was a good teacher. My first few workshops, there were hiccups, you know, but I get that from my mom. A little in my DNA is just like, you kind of just natural born bullshitter. I don't know if I can I
You
cuss?
can say that. It's fine.
Okay. Natural born bull, you know what. And then the BS became actual things that I do. And I became more of like knowledgeable on calligraphy because I like wanted to research it and wanted to know all the things so I could feel more confident in my teaching anyway. So workshops. And then probably around 2013. So that was 2013. I started teaching workshops, and naturally through that, for the next couple of years, I was basically just doing wedding stationery and workshops. And the wedding stationery design aspect came like a year after just doing calligraphy addressing.
Okay.
And I didn't know any Adobe stuff. So that was also a thing that I said yes to before actually knowing what to do. And then in 2015, John and I moved into a workspace that was like a work live loft thing with also like a photo studio attached to it. And there was when I was approached by a literary agent who was actually my mom's like gym instructor.
Okay.
And my mom weaves through my story like all the time. But Jill, being the supportive mom that she is, was like, you got to follow my daughter on Instagram. She does watercolor and calligraphy and blah, blah, blah. And my agent's name is Kimberly. She has like a degree and background in literary. And she was like, oh, I've been wanting to start my own literary agency. And so my mom was like, you should follow my daughter. So she followed me and reached out and was like, hey, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I was like, no, but let's talk. And so that's when Everyday Watercolor came to be. Was in 2015, we put together a pitch and sent it to the top 5 publishers in the US, Penguin Random House, and I forget the rest. But yeah, HarperCollins, you know. And Penguin Random House responded. They said, yes, that would work perfect for our in-house publishing company, 10 Speed Press. So that's when Everyday Watercolor kind of came about, was 2015-16 and published in 2017. And then I took my workshops around the world to do my book tour and workshops. And then in 2017, I started getting into licensing my work. Watercolor was like predominantly what I was known for. At this point, I was still doing calligraphy. I was still doing weddings. I had a girl named Brooke who took over my old business Monvoir, which is the wedding business that I ran under that name. But at the time in 2017, she was doing all of the calligraphy and eventually all of the wedding jobs, just everything, like the design and client communication, all that stuff, because I wanted hands out of that. Yeah. And I was doing licensing, and somewhere in the middle of that or in between that too, I started teaching more online courses because I taught my first online course with Brit & Co. in 2014 and then launched my first online course on my own in 2018. That was my stationery course. So I teach all of the wedding stationery stuff and custom stationery and whatnot in my course, Pen to Press. And that was launched when I was pregnant with Miles, my son, who's 3 now. Wow. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize it. Yeah. That was launched when you were pregnant. Because I was like, placed in my mind, like when exactly Miles was born. Okay. So yeah, that a wild journey. And then are you working on your 3rd book, or did that just come out?
It comes out next summer. So July 2023.
Okay.
I have a sketchbook, like an Everyday Watercolor sketchbook that comes out this coming July. So technically 4 books, but the sketchbook is mostly not a book. It's like got some prompts in there and then blank pages to paint in. But yeah, my 3rd book of Everyday Watercolor is Everyday Watercolor Oceans, and that comes out next summer.
Oh, cool. That's really exciting. Yeah, I definitely have. Your first book is in my house somewhere. I just don't remember exactly where.
Very cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you mentioned that you transitioned away from Monvoir and Brooke took that over. So she's still running that separately? Does like that brand still exists, just independent from you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So she started doing jobs with me back in 2015. And I basically, for a few months, she was my understudy. She basically studied my calligraphy as hard as she could and tried to mimic it as much as she could. She got very, like, you can't really tell the difference between I can tell the difference, but nobody could tell the difference.
Yeah.
Like, clients wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And also when she started, that's all, she didn't know any calligraphy at that point at all. But I could tell she was creative and she would, be flexible and be fun to be around in the office. And we turned out to be besties. So that was a really good decision, but it was kind of, again, like I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted help and I didn't want to be addressing envelopes anymore. And so she started picking up all the jobs for me after I trained her in Illustrator and Photoshop and all of that, probably in 2017.
Okay. That's pretty incredible to like be able to hand that off and somebody has kind of like kept it alive, even though you're like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. So very cool.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Okay. So obviously another big transition that has happened for you over the past couple years, and maybe this happened right before the pandemic. John joined you full time. So you guys worked together underneath Jenna Rainey. When did this become clear that it was going to be the best decision for your family? And what roles do each of you have within the business? And of course, what is it like working with your spouse? I know that's like a lot all at once.
Full packed question. Love it. So John started working with me full time in June of 2019. He's always like been a like very supportive brainstorming pseudo employee, but obviously had his other jobs. So in June of 2019, 4 months after having Miles, he came on full time. And it was like another situation when I first started my business. Like we started before we were actually prepared for both of us to be full time. But it worked out very well because as a new mom and someone who had just launched like the online course facet of my business, like separate from other companies, it was becoming way too much for me to manage. I had just lost my assistant that I had had for a few years. I handed off all the wedding jobs to Brooke, obviously, and the whole brand. And I was kind of making my path as Jenna Rainey LLC instead of being attached to Monvoir and all of the weddings, because I got so much good reputation and a huge portfolio in the wedding industry. I built so many amazing relationships with some of the top photographers, the magazines like Martha Stewart Weddings and blogs and all of that. And they knew me as the wedding stationery person. If you want watercolor and wedding stationery, go to Monvoir. And that was kind of like I knew I didn't want to do any more wedding jobs. And I knew that my passion was teaching. I've always loved that aspect of my business and just like naturally feel like I'm here to teach. So I've been asked for years, like, why don't you have a YouTube channel? Why don't you have a YouTube channel? Like, it just makes sense because I was posting a lot of tutorials on Instagram through videos and then also Snapchat at one time when that was a thing. But so I had like these video tutorials, but then was like, yeah, I should have a YouTube channel, but there's no way I'm going to have the time between juggling new motherhood and my new online course endeavors and not having an assistant right now to launch and create videos for a YouTube channel. So that's basically why and how John came on. He was not a videographer. Like, he had never used a, camera, like a proper HD camera to shoot any videos. Like, he knew nothing about lighting, and we just bought equipment after researching tons and tons of blogs on, other videographers and stuff. And so we bought some equipment, basically just hodgepodged our way through it and started posting videos. I think in, I want to say it was like June 20, it was like pretty immediately after he quit his job. And that has grown. We're like almost at 200,000 subscribers over the last 2 years, millions of hours of watch time, whatever, that kind of stuff. But I love the YouTube channel. We love working together. There's obviously moments where, we've been married for 12 years, so our communication is pretty on point. On point at this point.
Yeah.
But there's things that where like we don't see eye to eye. And I have like I have my operations manager, Kelly, now, and I have a lot of meetings, just us two, where we're like making future plans. Like we plan about a year in advance, sometimes more. And so there's things that John is out of the loop on because he's not at those meetings. And so he's like, I want to do these videos. So that's where our main issues are, is because he's not looped in on some of the bigger communication with me and Kelly. Because we're talking about things that don't really apply to his like area of the business. But I think what's really helped us work so well together, because really we rarely fight, we rarely have issues. But I think one of the main reasons why we do work so well together is because he has full reign and like authority in the YouTube arena of my business. Like I don't want to be the one researching how to title this video or like what's going to do best on our channel, like brainstorming those types of things, or uploading the videos or editing the videos. Like I don't want to have any sort of input or creative direction on that, because I want him to have like full authority and feel like he's the expert on the YouTube side. And so he comes to me with all of the creative ideas and the like, what do you think of this or whatever? And so I think that's why it works so well, is because I'm not like in there micromanaging, because I am very hands off. And so I basically show up when he has the video stuff set up and start painting and teaching, and then he takes it from there.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm glad that you guys have found a balance that is obviously working really well for the two of you. And I think being able to have a little bit of that independence, not having the fingers and everything, helps create like separation for sure. This wasn't a question that I had written down, but of course now I want to ask. So your transition to motherhood, like once you had Miles, what was like the thing that caught you off guard the most about transitioning into motherhood, like while running a business? Because I have yet to do that, maybe someday, but I know there's a lot of people listening who have probably experienced that or are about to experience that.
Yes. So everything was a complete shock. And I don't want it to sound like doomsday, because I say this like in my head every single day, like, because every age right now is my favorite age. 3, like you hear about the terrible 2s and the terrible 3s. So far, 2 and 3 has been my favorite. But there's daily challenges, daily rewards. But like running a business and becoming a new mom was the biggest shock to my system, like my health, obviously my sleep, stress levels, and all of that. But it was like, I feel like if you can be a mom, you can literally do anything.
Right.
Truly. Or a dad too, because John is very hands-on in the parenting. Then like he was up with Miles, helping change diapers in the middle of the night and all that stuff. Like he was very hands-on too. So it's just like, I guess the biggest shock to me was that my time was not my own anymore, and like literally none of my time. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be like Debbie Downer or anything. Just like how it was for me nothing could be anticipated. Even the way my birth went down, like he was 2 weeks late, all of these things that I was like, oh, he'll come on time or even early and everything's going to go. We were going to have a home birth, and that didn't end up happening because they wouldn't let me have a home birth when I was 2 weeks late. So we had to go to the hospital. So like everything was just like, okay, we have to throw all expectations out of the window. You want to launch a course a month after you have a child? I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So like that kind of stuff was like the biggest shock, where I had no real control over my time anymore. And I had to be a lot more flexible. So yeah, it's the best thing ever though.
Yeah.
Best thing.
And I guess follow up to that, like eventually, because you have to put systems in place, right? So what are things or steps you took to make that more manageable for you, to counteract the like doomsday portion?
Sure. Yeah. So I have like the most dialed, because of my operations manager, not because of me, most dialed like business and systems and operations at this point in my business. So like as of the last year, I would say maybe 2 years, or when she started with me in 2020, October 2020 and on. But obviously it took some time for us to get it really built into place. But as of the last 2 years, I've felt like my business is so solid. I could take months off if I wanted to, and it would continue thriving. And that was not the case when I had Miles. When I had Miles, it was like, we just launched Pen to Press in December. I had Miles in February, and that went really well. And thank God it went really well, because I need like 6 months to recover from all of what just happened. And like all of, so that was kind of like lucky timing wise for me. But if I had like the system, so we use Asana to like track not only our time, but different projects that we're working on, and everything is recorded in Loom, like the steps we take and how we answer emails, or how we schedule reply emails, or how we upload videos to YouTube is recorded in Loom, or how we upload podcasts. And if Kelly, for example, when I had my podcast, my operations manager, she was doing all of the transcripts in Rev and like uploading all of the Zencaster files and publishing it to the podcast apps and whatnot. And like, I have no idea how to do that. So if Kelly died or like had to be out for 2 weeks in an emergency situation, like what would I do? So everything in our system, like the way the business is run, literally everything is recorded in Loom. And there's some things that we've like haven't done. And I'm not saying we're perfect. Like there's some things we haven't recorded, but like, there's just like emergency situations where we know where we have backup if somebody needs to take time off, or, something comes up. So if I were to have a kid now, like if it was now that I was having Miles, I would feel like way more at ease, especially with the level of business that I'm at. Fast forward 3 years, because I have, instead of one online course, I now have 6 or 7 or something online courses. I have a lot more licensing partnerships and like a lot more things going on in my business. So I need the support a lot more than I did in 2018-19 when I was having Miles, because I just had the one online course and it did pretty well. So we were just kind of riding on that until I could come out with the next online course. And then I hired Kelly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you basically have all of your documentation. That's a word that I hear my husband use a lot in his area of work, of like, you always need documentation. So if something happens, people know what needs to happen in the business. The next question you have already answered for me, because I asked who else you have behind the scenes, besides John working for you. And so obviously Kelly is really integral in everything that you guys are doing and keeping things organized. So at what point, obviously Pen to Press came out right before you had Miles, but when did you make that decision that you were going to introduce education to your business, specifically courses, and how did you pivot towards that? I think that's a question we get a lot in our community of like, well, I'm starting to get questions like, should I teach? How should I teach? Like, like, where do I even start with something like that? So I'd like to hear a little bit of your insight, and I'm sure our listeners would too.
Yeah. So online courses, obviously, like I mentioned in my story, I've been teaching basically since I started my business, watercolor and calligraphy, kind of just randomly. And I also grew up teaching piano to like little kids and stuff. So teaching has kind of always been a thing. But online courses, I don't remember how Brit & Co. found me, or because I didn't pitch to them, and I don't remember if I knew them at all. But I started teaching with them. I have like 3 courses on Brit & Co.'s website. But I started teaching with them in 2014. And in 2017-18, when I knew that I was going to have a kid soon, probably in 2018 when I actually got pregnant, I was like, I know I don't want to do weddings full-time, if at all, because to me, and I like was able to make 6 figures off of wedding stationery design alone. I was making a good career. I was supporting Brooke, an employee, and then an assistant as well. So like, I knew that it was like, I could make a thriving business out of it and probably ride it out till I retire or a few years or whatever. But I just personally, like, that was not fully aligned. Like for the first few years to get my creative business off the ground, it absolutely funded all of these other things like workshops and online courses. And it was so important for that. But for me, my personality, I'm not, if you know me in person too, like I've never been a girly girl. Not that like all weddings are this way, but just like, that's just never been my scene. I've just like always been more of like sporty spice vibes. I get along with I get along with guys a whole lot more than I do girls usually, like that type of person. And so like the wedding industry was like, it was a tough at times, and it's tough even for people who aren't like that, like because wedding clients can kind of be tricky to navigate sometimes, to put it nicely. And so I knew I wanted to move on in 2018. And I just had naturally this was at the time when my Instagram was picking up steam through watercolor stuff. Everyday watercolor was out and I was touring the world with workshops. And so I had a decent following on Instagram. And so I had this ability to pull my audience or like get like active live market research from my potential customer before I had to create this course. Like, oh, I see that there's a lot of people trying to start wedding stationery businesses, or they have questions on how to digitize their artwork and make prints out of it. So maybe I should launch my own online course on this. And at the time, at least I wasn't aware of any other courses on wedding stationery, but there was no other, I don't think so. There might have been, but I don't think there was any other online courses specifically on wedding stationery and the business side. There was a course in Modern Calligraphy Summit. I think Carla Lim taught it. You probably know she has written word calligraphy.
Yeah, she's been on the podcast.
Yeah, she's awesome. So she taught a lesson in Modern Calligraphy Summit that we were a part of together. And we've been friends for years because she started like a year or two after me. But she taught a lesson on like planning out. I don't remember the exact details, but it was kind of like planning out a wedding suite or whatever. And I was like, I've taught in 2 summits. I've taught all these courses with Brit & Co. Can I do this on my own, like, and teach my own way of designing wedding invitations? And like, I don't see any course out there that like from start to finish, how to do a wedding state, and then working with a print shop or prepping files for print, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I just kind of did it. And to sum it up, I haven't looked back since. Like I said, I've been kind of like constantly creating courses since then, because that's where I've like really found my excitement and like true alignment with my business is through teaching, and then the YouTube channel too. But I think like if people out there listening who like are dabbling with the idea of creating an online course or whatever, I mean, I think anybody relatively, like obviously there's the exception to the rule, but I think anybody has something to teach. That could be like how to can food or, something random. Like it doesn't have to be exactly what you see that's already available and already out there, but it can be like something that you literally have no clue about, like I did when I first launched in 2018. And since then, like I have so many different core funnels and like evergreen systems and Facebook ads and triggers and automations and things set up that at the time when I launched my first online course, I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I did have an email list, but it was like, I like didn't use my email list. It was like a few people that had never heard from me. I like sent them an email a year. And so now talking about online courses, there's a whole lot more to it, like technical stuff. But at the time it was just like, just go for it and work out all the details later kind of approach.
Yeah. I actually did I read it or did I listen to it? I don't know, because you do have a lot of content basically about how your email list like kept your business alive. So like I feel like that was a huge pivot, because you were basically saying with the algorithm and how people kind of have to fight against that now, like your email list was what kept you basically like grounded and connected to your audience. And I thought that was like really fascinating. It was like a short little episode, but it was so good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm at first, like obviously I said my email list was like collecting spider webs, but now it's my favorite part of my business is writing the emails. All of the behind the scenes like workflows and automations and stuff is done by Kelly now, but I think it's just so fascinating, and all the like nerdy number stuff. Totally love it. And marketing and SEO and all those things that I had no idea were things that were important or existed when I started my business. Now I'm like so excited about that stuff. But yeah, totally keeps the business afloat.
Do you have any courses that are specifically for things like that, like SEO related or systems related? I wasn't sure if you had anything like that in your list of courses.
Yeah, so I launched Elevate with Email, I think last year, and that course covers everything about email list building and automations and attracting new leads. We don't cover tons of Facebook ad stuff because I actually don't use that many. I don't spend that much on Facebook ads anymore, but there's a lot of like templates in there too, like swipe copy for your welcome sequence, swipe copy for sales campaigns, launches, all that kind of stuff. So Elevate with Email. And then I also have a mini course that is called Show Up in Searches that is all about SEO on Google, Pinterest, any sort of search engine. So how to use Google Search Console, Google Analytics, how to hook it up to your website, also how to discover the right keywords, how to discover your audience, that kind of stuff. So that's in Show Up in Searches. And me, Kelly, and then my chief financial officer, Andres, who is actually Kelly's husband, he does a lot of like freelance finance stuff for me and analysis. We're going to team up and launch an online course on systems, organization, financial analysis, and profit and loss and stuff that is like more of a general business course. So that is TBD, but those are the more marketing-ish courses that I have, plus the business course that's going to be coming out in a few months.
That's awesome. Perfect. You have a solution for both things that I asked for. I love your website because it's like easy to get like lost in your website. There's so much to like find in every nook and cranny. It's like one of the funnest websites to be on, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we only have a few more questions before we'll kind of wrap things up with our time together. But what do you have to pivot a little bit? What advice do you have for artists who are just now starting to think about licensing their work to companies? I know you also have a course on this, and that's also could be its entirely own episode. But I'm going to ask you to try to like sneak in a quick like tip for people.
Yeah. So yes, I do have a course on licensing. I teach it with my licensing agent, Julie Turkel, who's been in the business for 25 years. And it's a super in-depth course on it. But my biggest piece of advice when people are wanting to start to get into licensing, and you don't just need to be an artist. You could be a ceramic artist. You can be like people think, oh, watercolor, lettering, the more traditional arts, but it spans way wider than that, musicians, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, my first like step or the step on the checklist before you get into licensing is to be really clear on your visual identity or your brand identity. So like, what is your look and feel, and how will that make your work more marketable or more attractive to manufacturing companies? And for people who don't really know what licensing is, it's obviously where you're licensing a piece of your work or a trademark that you own or something to another company. So our course is called Brand Plus Brands because it's literally two brands coming together to make a thing. In terms of the work that I do, I'm licensing my like watercolor or patterns or whatever to manufacturing companies so that they put it on their products. So I have shower curtains, dish towels, yoga towels, phone cases, whatnot, with a bunch of different brands with my artwork on it. And it's an amazing business model for artists because it's like a passive income money stream. And if you are really, really centered or focused on what your visual identity is and what really sets you apart in the industry, because artists are a dime a dozen, but there's also millions of retail companies. There's millions of manufacturing companies. Licensing is a global industry. And so you could be in Europe, you could be in Australia, you could work with, US-based manufacturing companies if you're based outside of the US, like all of that. So it's really like, what is going to set your work apart in a pitch to a manufacturing company? So being really clear on what your visual identity is, and that like kind of secondarily to that, and something that is tied into that is who is your ideal client or brand to work with. So like something that I paint might look like a perfect fit for Target. So I'm not going to pitch it to Anthropologie or something more high end. Like the customer, mass consumer type of customer that's walking Target or the aisles of Walmart or something is going to be a completely different customer for the most part that's walking the aisles of Nordstrom or Saks or, Anthropologie. So being really clear on what your visual identity is so that you can attract clients or brands that have that customer that's also attracted to that style. Or when you're pitching to them, it's just really clear to them that they can definitely market your artwork because it's aligned with their customer. And another thing too with that, with like having a really good grasp on your visual identity, is it's going to be a common theme throughout your work, on your Instagram, on your portfolio, on your website, and it's going to be more recognizable on the shelves of stores. And then when people scroll their feeds and they see it, they're going to know, oh, that's Jenna Rainey's work, or that's so-and-so Kelly Ventura's work, or, whoever's work that they're, maybe walking through Target or scrolling their feeds, like I said. And so creating recognizable, memorable work is a really important part of that. And when you are able to do that, that's like when you hit your sweet spot in the licensing industry, because you're just going to be more marketable from the side of the manufacturing company.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that summarized it really well. Taking a little snippet. Okay, so you obviously have so many courses and ways that people can learn from you. My original question was like, tell us about all the amazing courses and resources. Well, we've touched on a lot of them. So I think at this point, like, what's the best way for someone to like go to your website and get started? Like, where should they start? Should they get on your email list? Should they start with a bite-sized course? Like, for people listening and, they're thinking to themselves, like, I got to get in on this. Like, where do they need to be going?
Mm-hmm. So if you want to learn what I teach in Pen to Press, all about custom stationery design, that's going to be jennarainey.com/pen to press. And we actually open the doors to registration again this April 4th to 10th or 11th. I can't remember. But so that'll be open again soon. But I would say the best place to go for people, and then they can kind of go down their own path from there, is to go to my blog, jennarainey.com/blog, because I'm posting twice a week on there, different topics, email marketing, SEO, stationery business stuff, and even just like art only related topics, like the ultimate guide to picking a paintbrush or watercolor or whatever. So kind of browse around my blog and figure out what content feels most aligned, because every business is so different in the needs that they have. And so that's why I have a bajillion courses, because a stationery designer maybe has a really good grasp on digitizing their artwork and the whole like stationery design aspect, but they don't know anything about SEO, or they don't know anything about building an email list. So that's why I have that separate. But all my courses live on jennarainey.com/courses. And my Instagram. So I share a ton of stuff on my Instagram too, mostly behind the scenes. But I would just check out my blog and you can kind of go from there. My email list is where I'm sharing a lot of additional tips as well. But you can find that on my blog too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time. So to end the episode, we always like to ask people, like, what's on the docket for the remainder of your year? So what goals do you have set for yourself, or what things are you trying to accomplish in your business that you'd like to see done by the end of this year?
Yes. So we do this every year in October. And I say this like I've been doing this for a decade, and I haven't. It's been like 2 years. But so for the past 2 years, Kelly and I have done our future planning meetings in October or November-ish for the coming year. And this year's goals were to automate and turn one of my courses, which is going to be Pen to Press, into an evergreen funnel. So that's one of our like more like tangible goals of this year. And that's going to happen probably next month, where we're doing like a webinar evergreen funnel for that course. And so having some sort of automated course evergreen funnel is just going to be nice for obviously automated income daily or monthly, whatever. But in terms of like creative goals and alignment goals, because that's what I've been realizing the past couple of years, is that I've had a lot of like business goals and revenue goals and things that are very exciting and obviously very important. I still have those, revenue goals, business goals. But something that I've been like really longing for is to come back to what feels aligned with my creative process. So like I've been pumping out work like I'm a machine for the past however long. And because I can, just continuing that. And I don't know if you've ever struggled with this being a wedding stationery person or people listening, but like when you're a wedding stationery designer, you're essentially not the creative director of the jobs that you do. Like your client is usually the creative director, or you're working together somewhat, but the client has a very strong opinion because they have the specific color palette that they want to match with their bridesmaid dresses or their flowers or whatever. And so for the longest time, it took me probably a good 2 years after shifting out of the wedding industry to find my creative director voice in my own work, because it had been for the first 5-6 years, I'd been directed by my clients. And so I'm still every day, like that's one of my biggest goals this year, is to everything to feel like extremely aligned and directed by me, because it's still, even in licensing, been a big shift for me to like find that voice and find that like alignment. I have my style, like, whatever that means, but just feeling like I'm leaning into that intuition a little bit more and leaning into that creative director voice a little bit more. So those are my goals.
That's great. I love that. Thank you so much. So your handle's at Jenna Rainey, right, on Instagram. Are there any characters in that?
No characters, just at Jenna Rainey.
No characters. Okay. And then jennarainey.com. Everything is Jenna Rainey.
Jenna Rainey.
YouTube is Jenna Rainey. And so you have so many great ways for people to learn from you. So thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time today. And hopefully we'll have some people that are reading your blog, reaching out, hopefully getting involved in your courses and stuff like that. So thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Hey guys, we just wanted to hop in and talk about one of our amazing resources, the A to Z directory. All of us have thought at some point, how did she do that, or how did she make that? And maybe you don't know where to start or how the heck to produce this amazing product you've dreamt up.
Well, the A to Z directory is the missing puzzle piece in your biz, you guys, seriously. So it's built in the form of a yearly membership, and it's your one-stop shop for finding suppliers and vendors for all the things. Literally where to print everything from custom invitations, greeting cards, mugs, koozies, acrylic printing, letterpress, custom ribbon. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And it literally goes from A to Z. From acrylic printers to zipper pouches, we have it in the A to Z directory.
We want to help all of you search less and create more with this list of 300 plus vendors and suppliers. Don't worry, they're very organized. It's not going to be overwhelming and confusing when you join. And this membership also includes access to a private Facebook community. It's incredibly active and involved. And if you need a question answered fast, that is definitely the place to go.
Yeah, our Facebook group really is the best. You guys, everyone is so helpful in there. And we're in there too, answering questions you guys might have. So it's a great way to get access to us and ask us things without sliding into our DMs. So we're more likely to answer you in the Facebook group, just saying. Anyway, also in the Facebook group, this is new for 2020 and we're really excited about it. We are hosting monthly Power Hour Q&A sessions that are live, and these are only available to our A to Z directory members. So you can hop in with us live and ask us all your burning questions in real time and just hang out with us every month. And we do these at different times so you can actually be there live, and the replays are always available in the Facebook group for members.
This resource is priced at $147 a year, which honestly is extremely affordable and is full of so many benefits, such as exclusive vendor coupons for members only. And we would love to have you guys join. Seriously, it's kind of like our family and our tribe. So visit bizbirthdaybash.com/directory to sign up today and use coupon code podcast2020 to receive $20 off your first year. That's podcast, all caps, 2020 for $20 off your first year.
We can't wait to see you in the Facebook group.